Thanks for joining the August Uždavinys reading group. We're going to be finishing up chapter 1 today. I'm here with Fig. We're going to have a good discussion after my usual introduction. Rudy was not available today, but we'll go ahead and record this and then put it up in the usual place on YouTube and other places. And I really want to thank Fig for taking time out to go ahead and join, and I look forward to our discussion. In this final reading of chapter 1, Uždavinys sums up his assertion that Greek philosophy has its roots in Egyptian temple teachings, myths, and ritual practice. We've seen how he opposes contemporary understandings of philosophy as originating in or primarily focusing on the analytical or hyper-rational thought. Instead, he asserts that philosophy is as much a way of life, the give and take of mundane realities, as it is an intellectual understanding or undertaking. We've also seen him begin his outline of what he means by theurgic practice, and we'll start to get into that in the next chapter. Each of the commonly known statements of Aristotle about philosophy beginning in wonder and of Plato about philosophy being a training for death are placed in the contexts of various Egyptian religious practices, in particular the mummification process, both its preparation of the physical body and the associated mythical representations of the soul's journey through the afterlife realms of reality. He affirms the notion that we can become sons and daughters of God, in the literal sense, becoming like God. Not children of God as the Christians understand it, but God-like as the theurgists understand it. This question of becoming sons and daughters of God is obviously very controversial, and various religious traditions would find it sacrilegious and heretical. However, it's a mainstay among theurgists and perhaps some Greek Orthodox hesychasts. During the philosophical process of discussion, analysis, syllogism, and ascertainment of truth, he says our physical and spiritual bodies are reconstructed. We leave the body behind and become intelligences, or nous, which means mind in Greek. But he wants us to realize that there is no sharp distinction between body and soul, as we are commonly told is true in Christianity or other Abrahamic religious teachings. The relationship between body and soul is more complex in Egyptian thought. The body is always interacting with the soul, which vivifies it and helps it participate in mundane and cosmic realities. The body is not despised, since it reflects this ongoing process of spiritual embodiment from above. He says the body is a hieroglyphic of the alchemical transformation that takes place in the philosophical process. The body, in its actions in the everyday world, manifests the divine ideas by way of virtue and the many thaumaturgic actions that humans perform in bringing the world to fruition and bringing about the will of the gods. The soul's descent and ascent into and from the material is really the action of the one, however, the highest dimension of reality, and not the action of an individual. Again, this will go towards his contention that the ultimate goal of the philosophical process is assimilation with the one, the transcendent reality. So philosophy makes us minds as opposed to simply bodies. The theurgic aspect of philosophy unites us with the noetic principles, those ideas that Plato writes about in what he calls the world of forms, and which Uždavinys says corresponds to the Egyptian divine world, where we conform our activity to the paradigms. With theurgy, we conform our lives to the paradigms of the celestial world, where the principles of both spiritual and material realities reside. Dialectic, the practice of question and answer, the analysis of ideas, and the unraveling of true and false assumptions, the formulation of valid syllogisms. This activity and practice assimilates us to God. For the Greek and the Egyptians, it is the science of purification. Platonic dialectic causes the soul to turn to and acknowledge and return to itself. He says that the rending and tearing that can go on during the engagement with others in determining the truth, the often painful process of seeing ourselves fighting with delusion and illusion to find what's real, is based on the model of sacrifice. This sacrifice itself resembles and imitates cosmogony, the genesis and unrolling of the many worlds from spirit to materiality and back. Platonic dialectic follows the sacred path of rest, procession, and reversion, the processes which Neoplatonists identified as the sacred cycles of the universe in its yearly advance from death to life to renewal. According to the theurgists, this is how the cosmos descends from the divine and holy good and ascends back to it once its time on the material plane is exhausted. Once again, Uždavinys identifies a starting point, which is to flee the material world of the body and focus instead on the unchanging and eternal ideas that comprise transcendent reality. When we do this, we move from the irrational to spiritual and rational completeness, the ultimate goal being what Plato calls the good. We are to become wise and good people, both virtuous and knowledgeable. What is the role of myth in this process? For obviously, Greek and Egyptian philosophy engage the mind and the soul with many myths. And these, such as the ones we find from Orpheus and Dionysus, are interpreted in very illuminating and powerful ways by the theurgists and philosophers like Plato. The expansive notion of the Egyptian solar religion and its association to the Platonic world of forms helps Uždavinys to explain the roots of philosophy in mythic thought. Uždavinys says that myth is a symbolic logos. By logos, he means that myth has significance beyond the simply literal meaning of the imagery. And that more than literal meaning has implications beyond the merely material or mundane realities. Myth has a sacramental function. It allows us to ascertain and experience the transcendent in the mundane. It transforms our minds and makes them more conducive to seeing the transcendent within the mundane. Uždavinys says the universe is a myth itself. That is, the physical world hides inner realities within their outward forms. In this way, myths can help teach the unlearned and spur them to seek truth in more than material realities. Understanding the meaning of myths, they progress from the myth and strive for truer knowledge. Gaining this knowledge involves climbing from images to the noetic archetypes that finally end in the divine intellect of the transcendent one itself. Myths also spur the learned, who often become so lazy they become complacent in their belief that they know all things. Philosophy is on the side of the Egyptian god Horus, Uždavinys says. This means that we are to be virtuous individuals. All of our actions and behaviors should have their meaning to maintain the cosmic order. This is part of the effort to, quote, restore the initial golden purity, unquote. We should dispel ignorance through knowledge and our exercise of magic and thaumaturgy. In the last session, we saw that Uždavinys ended with the final ascent of the soul in its otherworldly journey to become one with the ultimate and transcendent reality. This union with the highest reality brings about the dissolution of individuality, in the all-comprehensive reality. That solution is confirmed and expanded upon in his final argument in these last 30 pages. While we might find this solution unsatisfactory, that is perhaps the final step to realization that we need to make in our personal journey of self-discovery. I want to sum up by saying that what I find attractive about Uždavinys' theory here is the way it engages my imagination. His entire narrative makes the things he describes very mysterious and entrancing. They are very powerful in calling forth significant and meaningful thoughts and images that have an almost numinous feel to them. For me, this aligns nicely with the way that William Blake spoke of poetry and prophecy, that is, as an exercise of the imagination in calling forth new worlds and new realities. At the same time, his placement of philosophy as associated with Egyptian practices has its significant historical dimension. If we could somehow prove that these were indeed practices of the Egyptian priests, we would be able to imitate them and achieve the same effects as they achieved. Ultimately, the test for Uždavinys' theory is how well it holds up against historical studies. He would contest this by saying there's a secret aspect to the practices, which he has insight into, and perhaps he also has secret knowledge from his Sufi teachers. In some ways, one might give him the benefit of the doubt and say that there's a metaphorical similarity to what we know from recent historical studies. But as for a literal one-for-one correlation between the practices, this seems to be illuminating, imaginative, visionary. But again, how do they hold up in practice? Thank you for hanging in there. Thanks. Fig, what did you think of this of this reading? I know last time I think we ended with that notion of we're dissolution of individuality.
And I'm just confirming, like we read through chapter 2. That's what we're discussing, right?
1.
Oh, okay. 1. Okay. I read ahead then.
That's perfect. I mean, we'll be ready for next time then.
Okay, great. Let me go back to my notes for chapter 1. But yeah, it's fascinating to me. I'm starting to see a lot of my own studies be validated cross-culturally. And he gets into that in chapter 2, specifically these parallels with Tantra. But this nullification of the self and becoming Amun-Ra in ritual. And that initiation is into this Atum-Ra, this kingly being. And I'm curious, and I'm sorry that I read ahead. I thought last reading was chapter 1 and this reading was chapter 2.
Yeah, we take it a slow approach, but that's fine. No, we can look forward and then get into more detail next time.
Yeah. But
something
yeah,
about this maybe having a ritual.
Yeah, and that's where I'm curious about all of this, because I think there is, so much missing in understanding the day-to-day practice of the priest or priestess, and then what are these initiations, and that purification process of purifying the thought, the logos, especially, to prepare the vessel for receiving Amun-Ra, receiving this state of consciousness is what I believe we're talking about here. We have to nullify the sense of I am this person in order to receive what I think are, it's a solar consciousness, right? And within that solar consciousness, there are all of these planetary spheres as well. So it's not, it's beyond our understanding of human consciousness, right? What is it to nullify the self, but to, become one with the abysmal aspects of the universe, the nothing to receive the all. So um I'm just finding my place in my notes for chapter 1. So just give me one moment. There we go.
Perfect.
Yeah. So yeah, and I think that this is in the Egyptian ritual of, and even myth, right, of Osiris being torn apart and then reassembled. And I think that's what we as practitioners um, are striving to do is, in a way, like undo all of this programming of who you think you are to receive this greater mystery of self, the uppercase self, so to speak.
Right, right.
And I wonder, in this process of mummification, there's this beautiful story that I see unfolding in that there is this descent of the soul, and through death we ascend. And for the adept, the journey is to do that in the living embodiment, in the living body. So I'm curious to understand that ritual in the living flesh, rather than what the Egyptians were doing with this deification through mummification. But also, I think what's interesting is that the pharaoh himself, or pharaohess, was seen as a god, and so they must have gone through these initiations. And I see that mummification as this process of creating, like a Hindu word for it is murti, this deity figure that then becomes a vehicle for the eternal soul, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, we're kind of making that soul, right? Because it's fallen. It's, we have to remember to get back. We have to remember, and from the Chaldean perspective, which theurgic perspective and Platonic perspective, we need to remember. We knew when we died and then were reborn, we knew while we were in this afterlife, we knew what the reality was. But yeah, then we fall and we forget, either because we chose to forget, or the gods maybe made us forget because they didn't want us to, for some reason or other. We didn't live a perfect life or a virtuous life, and so we forget. But some people can recall um, about that life and about the meaning of things and how we can continue to get back to that reality which we should become, because it is the good. It not only promotes our own personal welfare but also the welfare of the entire creation.
Mm.
One of the ways, and that's what he's taking up here in chapter 1, is philosophy. The whole philosophical enterprise itself. He says it's not just a mind fuck, or it's not just mental masturbation. It's really a process which is similar to, and this is where I think he gets into some problems. He's saying that it's similar to, and it's not just metaphorical, it's similar to this rending and this tearing that we talked about with Osiris, right? That is more than a metaphorical thing, but that process itself is taking place when we philosophize in the way, at least that he thinks that we should be, which is the whole dialectic, which is discussion of truth, what is reality, and those things as we go in, because we have to we have to recall, and reality is obviously changing all the time. We have to engage with what we're engaging with in our personal lives and the outside world, and be able to discern the truth and what's real from what's unreal, and et cetera, et cetera. So in that way, that's one way. But I think the mythical way, that's where, obviously in chapter 2, he begins to talk about that. What are the theurgic processes of purification that we can undertake to live that?
Yeah. I really like how he talks about philosophy as the right of learning to die before one dies. And I see that as we are searching for truth through philosophy, with philosophy as this vehicle that leads us there. It's a process of discovery. And what are we discovering but this union towards truth? And this discernment, I think, is a very important tool for the philosopher, but he really beautifully puts it as loosening the bonds. And I think what those bonds are these bonds to the ego, in a way of saying, like, this is this and that is that. But through philosophy, we can, in that loosening, move past the impasse of I am just this self towards, no, I am a spark of the divine and all lies within me. Yeah. And that purification, I think, is the essential part of really bringing that philosophy in. Because for me, truth is in this path of discovery. Truth is a feeling, and it's also a weapon. It's a sword that we have to sharpen, and that practice of philosophizing is the sharpening of the blade.
It's and I think that's important. When you say that it's an emotion, because in this is something more of current philosophy, what's going on in certain studies into consciousness and that kind of stuff. The way that Western philosophy has changed and evolved since the scientific revolution, kind of shortchanges emotion, kind of shortchanges feelings. And there's a movement away from that now. Emotions are coming more into play and are being seen as not just an illusion, as being as important a part of understanding reality as going out and doing a test, to find, the quantum entanglement, whether quantum entanglement is a reality or not. Our emotions also have a reality, which is as valid as anything else that science might be able to provide for us in terms of biological or physical processes.
I see it as the emotions are a union of body and intellect. And I say this because the age of enlightenment is based off of observation. We're removing feeling, and we're just using our sensory awareness to discern truth. Using the feeling, when I say truth is a feeling, there is this process of purification, again, that has to happen to get to that feeling of truth, because and if we slow it down, our body is sensing information, and that goes to the mind very quickly. And that intellect creates a story of what is this thing that I'm experiencing? And then boom, we make a decision on, do we fight? Do we flight? Do we stay? What's going on here? And when we sit in these higher, especially when we're talking about, these rituals of it becoming in union with the divine, I think it's important to drill the point home of like this, what is this purification of the intellect? How do we come closer to that feeling of truth? And it is in a stillness, I would say. And that's why meditation is so important, first and foremost, because when we're in that higher realm of consciousness, again, we're limited by this vessel. So we're going to, when we first start out, apply what we think we know. That's the lesser intellect, this human intellect, trying to discern the truth. I would say it's a feeling, because when we get into those higher states, it's almost blissful. And this is why I was really excited. I was really excited about our next talk, to get into chapter 2, because Tantra is really that, it teaches that method, that
The whole
that
body
state.
experience. It's like a whole
Yeah.
body experience.
Yeah.
That's where Western philosophy is going off the rails, right?
Yeah.
This is not a whole body experience. It's just part of the mind. It's just a mind exercise. Whereas if we get into and take this, you know, the notion of theurgy, the notion of ritual and purification, if we take that seriously, it's definitely a whole body experience where every all of our senses, all of our mind, everything is engaged.
Mm, exactly. Yeah.
So we can see reality as being, I think of it in terms of almost like a burning bush. The whole mind and body are aflame, with this understanding of reality as being much more. There'll be so many other aspects and dimensions to reality that if we limit it to just what we're feeling and in one dimensionally, that is not really what reality is. Reality is much more than that. And I can actually experience that as part of my whole body in this everyday life that I'm going through.
Yes. And this is where myth becomes very important, because what myth is giving to us is this archetypal language. And so in studying myth as philosophy, right, we are getting closer to, I think, the language of the gods, which often come to us in patterns. And then again, like, it's the intellect that is translating that. And we are able to bring down that descent of the gods into this lower vessel. And if we're lucky, we could translate it into whatever language we speak. Yeah.
What do you think about the role of? I mean, obviously, we haven't gotten a lot into ritual.
Mm.
He's seeing philosophy itself as kind of a ritualized process. And by philosophy, again, there are two aspects to that. There's the intellectual, but there's also the theurgic, which again is the next chapter. But there is a ritualistic aspect to both of those. You know, engaging with the mundane realities, engaging with those, being able to determine and ascertain truth from reality is very important, and that is ritualistic in some way. I mean, we can literally make our everyday life ritualistic.
It
I,
is it
I
naturally. Yeah.
and I believe that some have done it. You know, Yukio Mishima, the famous Japanese author, talks about making his life a poem. Well, in the same way, we could make our life a ritual. We could make everyday things ritualistic and engage with that and see, you know, speaking of the mythical, we can begin to see the transcendent in the mundane.
Mm.
I do believe that there are rituals that then there's the other aspect, which is the theurgic. And I was interested when you told me it's that you were going to create a ritual for the holidays and with Atum Ra. And I'm wondering, did you proceed with that? Did you do that?
So after reading chapter 2, which it really it just was so
You're giving the
validating,
whole
and
you're giving the whole point,
I know, but I won't get into it.
which
But
is
I
fine.
will
No,
say
that's fine. Yeah.
I will say this, the winter solstice it's the darkest night of the year. In Saturnalia, and so I'm seeing this pattern in ritual across cultures of, the Kabbalists call it the Merkaba light body, in uh, um, Tibetan tantra, like it's building this like light fetus, and so we're creating this form that can carry us through the abyss, carry us through these unknown darkness, really. And even, the Babylonians would meditate on the star so that they had this body to carry them. And so I think that's where my ritual is going for the solstice this year, is really focusing on being that light in the dark.
But you're literally creating something that you're going to enact, which is, I think, really important for people to realize that are listening to this, is that you, I, theurgists are talking about not just thinking about all of this stuff. We're literally talking about putting it into practice and rituals and carrying those rituals out. I do it in writing. I write theurgic rituals and then I carry them out, whether it's every day or once or
Mm.
twice a month or whatever. But it's something that I actually enact. It's not it's not as dramatic, although I want it to be dramatic as some of the other ones that I want to go into. But these are things that we want to enact and live through because they impact our lives. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just telling people who are going to be listening. And I think, maybe go into some of that. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for myself, I have I have my daily ritual, and that is really central to this process of purification. And so a lot of visualization, I think, is very important. Meditation is a given, obviously, to really just still the mind, clear the mind. Um, but again, like naturally, intuitively, even, and that's why it's so validating reading this text and seeing it all come together in this like a very ancient way, really fortifying this vessel of light, for my inner being, and that actually carries me into the world. So my daily ritual is really based around that. I live in a very chaotic place. And so as soon as I walk out the door, I'm bombarded by all sorts of energies. So over the years, it was a survival mechanism to create that ritual. But I also um, have planetary rituals, very much into planetary hours, but specifically, I think the easiest one to keep is around the lunar calendar. And of course, the solar calendar. Then, the solstices and equinoxes are a little more elevated in what is being done. I'd be happy to share too some of those, like my full moon ritual and.
But are these ones that you've created yourself, or are you? I mean, when I create mine, I'm trying to think. I mean, I just create them. It's just kind of an inspirational thing. Although I do take bits and pieces sometimes from other rites, such as that are those in the Greek magical papyri, for example. I use those as models. I've also followed the calendar that Jeffrey Kupperman has put into his work on the theurgic liturgy, where we have certain rituals per week that he's come up with and that he's developed based on his study of theurgy. But also, I have created my own. I've created a rosary for Hecate and
Beautiful.
things, and I published that one, which is available. But also, I've gone through others as well that I've created. So my question then is, are you creating these? What types of suggestions would you make for people who want to look further into this?
Sure. I would I strive to be a reconstructionist, but I think first and foremost, like that ritual, that daily practice, that daily purification ritual to really find this barometer of truth within yourself. And then study what you're drawn to. And as someone who strives to be a reconstructionist, oftentimes I feel very blessed because as I scour for information, the right information always finds its way to me. So as far as like my process for larger rituals, I really use the mundane astrology as sort of the landscape for what is happening right now. Who do I really need to honor? And because these planets are archetypes. These are archetypal energies that are like really impressing upon us. So if I have, for example, a full moon ritual, there is this general like ritual that I have, and then I will plan and like layer in if there are some extraordinary placements going on planetary wise, or maybe this last full moon in Gemini was very mercurial. I'll have a special altar like honoring the energies that are present. But that is just it. Like I think you can fill that ritual with whatever you're called for. I think first of all, you always need an intention, and whether that just be honoring the archetypal energies, gods, whatever you want to call them. For me, the most important thing about ritual is invocation. So I am becoming a vessel for my daemon or my goddess, or we can get into that. I could talk at length about that.
No, that's
But
fine. Yeah, no, I mean,
but really what
go ahead.
I will say that there is this, for me, it is this spirit that I am invoking, and it's the spirit is always present. But in that ritual space, we are creating a container. And so I often like to perform my rituals in nature. It can happen in a room, but there is this very tangible shift that happens once the circle is cast. I'm more of a 4 corner or 8 cardinal direction type, but for me, it's invoking the spirit outside as well, because you can have this audience of the trees, of the rocks, of these non-animated beings that become present in that space. And for me, in that ritual space, like that is in every single ritual, this invocation of the Great Spirit. So that is present. And then from there, as a priestess, really having a clear intent of like, what am I performing here? Because when you, what I call it, like opening the inner tabernacle, is just this goddess within and without becoming one. um it's not me. It is a very intense energy. And if I go there as a child, just sucking my thumb, saying, like, I just wanted to see you, mom, like, I might get a smack upside the head, you know? So honoring that opening of the space and calling forth these energies, I think it's very important that you have an intent. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a question, it can be just that. And I would say every ritual I've performed is an initiation, and I might do the same initiation over and over. And to me, this is this guardian energy, this sphinx energy that, we pass through in order to get to a holy, united space.
I live in the middle of the city, so it's difficult for me
Yeah.
for me to get out and if I did, I'd have to go really far, so there wouldn't be too many people around. All right, so you have access to natural sites like that?
Yeah, I also live in the middle of the city, but I'm in California, so I could just drive a couple hours into the desert.
Okay, but
Yeah.
I mean that's a significant time, right? Few
Yeah.
hours run out to the desert.
In the city, like if I'm
It's
doing
fun.
a
I
rich,
think it's great.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think a very powerful tool for me is, I create a circle of candles. So the fire element is a very essential tool in creating ritual because it's a spirit. It really is, and it adds a lot to creating the container. So, and I use mirrors a lot, so that's part of my,
Okay. Uh,
yeah.
mirrors are important.
Mm-hmm.
The portals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people use scrying as part
Yep.
as part of scrying. Yeah,
Yes.
I have my people. If you saw my, actually, this is my office, and if you saw it, it not only includes my library, it includes my altars, it includes, I'm every surface has something on it which is devoted to my praxis. So, uh, and my main altar is here to my left, and I take the cardinal directions as being indications of different aspects of life. There's death, life, being, creation, nothingness, and when I wake in the morning, that's part of my ritual is to pay homage to the spirits and the of the different directions, as well as always say a prayer to Hecate. Uh,
Beautiful.
I I also do my her one of the nice things about Uždavinys is saying because we do have certain different aspects to the theurgic and philosophical. We can read. Reading is part of that. He calls it hermeneutics, where we're doing study. He says that from his vantage point, at least, the priests were doing hermeneutics in that they were studying the sacred writings and determining, for their own edification, of course, but also just to understand and be able to disseminate it to others. You want to take that and be able to convey what you've learned, because this is a way. This is a way of liberation. This is a way of knowledge. This is a way for people to um, reorient themselves and attain a sense of equilibrium in a very, as you say, chaotic world. How
Mm-hmm.
are we bringing ourselves into alignment with what is a better way of life, as opposed to the way of life which is kind of rammed down our throats from the time we're born. For me, it's been a very long process. It's often been a very difficult process. It can be a very painful process. Um, but it's important enough for me to say, I want to learn more about it, and then I want to convey it to others as well, because I am getting something from it. I'm getting something out of it, I guess. And it's not just something like, sensory. It's not just sensory. It's not just, like watching a movie. It's not just like even just reading a book. It's much bigger than that. It's giving me a connection to something bigger and something much more whole than myself.
Absolutely. And I think for as we study the philosophy, so it gives us new ways of organizing what we might experience in our practice. Um, so we're striving for this union with the divine. We're striving for this experience of what I would call like a higher consciousness. And for me personally, through my studies, it's often like the other way around. Like I could study something and not fully understand it until I experience it. But generally, I mean, part of my practice is, I practice getting into trance with the scrying or with shamanic journeying. And it's often these images or things that come to me. And then I go look in the philosophy and find that, okay, this is not something that is unique to me. This is a universal experience, really. So I think that's, it's kind of like a left foot, right foot is like the ritual practice and then study, and you just keep making the progress to understanding.
I like that what you said. You have to you read it and then you actually live it, right? I mean, you read it and then to really understand it, you have to live it. And I think that's important. We can read all the Uždavinys that we want, but if it's not coming into our lives and somehow informing it, making it more enriching it, making it more powerful in some way, then it's really not going to go ahead and do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, and also I think it's just part of this natural flow, especially for those on the path, is this catabasis, anabasis, right? We go through this descent and ascent. And that ebb and flow, I think, happens naturally throughout our life. It could be this descent, this great loss, this horrific journey that you go through that leads you to the path that you're on. Um, and only through enduring that can you then go through your ascent and come back to the axis mundi, so to speak.
The things that it's like personal life, things that happened to me as a child, right? Everyday life is just comes at you and lays these things on you before you've even had a chance to like say, oh, wait a minute, how do I fight this? How do I understand this in a way that's going to really enrich me and make me a better person? It just happens. And then all of a sudden, you get to be a certain age and you realize, wait a minute, all of this stuff has happened and it's having this effect on me. It's having a negative effect. It's having a negative impact on me. How
Yeah.
do how do I deal with that now? How can I find a way that's going to help me process what this is and set me on a path which is going to, you know, deal with that negativity if it is negativity or even positivity, but it's going to build into something which is much higher than just my everyday life where I'm going to go ahead and go through the whole routine that we always go through: wake, eat, you know, die.
Mm-hmm.
Is there going to be something else which is going to bring me back to a much higher place of awareness and self-awareness and higher consciousness.
I think this is what Jung would call this the shadow work. And, a lot of our childhood informs who our shadow is. And what is our shadow? Our shadow it is a protector. It is something that is trying to keep you safe, but it comes out in very ugly ways. And it's often informed by trauma or survival. So I see the descent, the catabasis, as the shadow integration. Inanna goes down to the netherworlds and meets her sister, who then immediately slays her. But they're one and the same. She turns her ear to the call. And what is that call? It's her sister lamenting. Somebody who's never been heard, somebody who's never been seen by the other gods before. And I see that parallel in ourselves is we reach a point where we have to start peeling back the layers and asking ourselves, like, who is the one pulling my puppet strings right now? Is it my highest self or is it my shadow? And how do I unite my shadow with that highest self?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not easy work. It's really not.
No.
And that's where the mythology becomes important, because we can see parts of ourselves in that archetypal language and that archetypal stories. Yeah.
And they give us ways of dealing with it, right? I mean, what I find interesting about myth when I do engage with it is that I see, yes, I see myself in it as well, and myself, like the hero, obviously. I see myself as the hero. I'm going through the process of engaging with these demons, these monsters, these villains.
Gorgons, yeah.
I'm overcoming them, and that helps me then to come back and say, okay, well, I have the strength. I have the power to discern what is evil as opposed to what is good. And then I also have the strength to defeat those. And that happens on a level of an imagination. The question is, it's always to me, what is real, as opposed to what is unreal? And can we find that reality? Because in my engagement with people online, for example, one of the questions that people who are first coming to the occult or the esoteric studies, have you had an experience that is occult? Have you had an experience that is real? Are these daimons, are these entities real? And in what sense are they real? Aren't they just psychological manifestations of your mind? I mean, are they as real as a chemical reaction, for example, is the way I put it. And, I have to say they are real, and they're not just psychological manifestations of my mind. There are those types of things that have occurred. And my process has always been to be able to discriminate between what's a psychological manifestation as opposed to what's really happening in reality.
I think this is something we've lost also as a society. Is I agree with you. It's 100% real. And in my own practice, I've had experiences, not just mentally, but validated in the external world. And the thing that we've lost is this ability to congregate in ritual, this ability to participate in ritual and have a witness to these experiences. So I feel that's a large part of the work I would like to do in this world is create safe spaces for that. It's a huge undertaking, but
yeah,
because there are initiatory practices that have to happen, not in the sense of like, we're putting a mark on your forehead and you're now, we know you've had this thing. but I think there is a vetting to ensure that the purity is there in the space, that this process of purification has been done to a certain extent for those present. But I also am I do believe that initiation is a very personal internal process. I don't think that I've never been one to, join a group to be initiated. I don't think that's how it works.
Do you believe in the self-initiation, as they call it? You know,
Yeah.
and like for thelema and other occult practices, people are self-initiating, which I consider I self-initiated into the theurgic practices through Kupperman's work.
Yeah, and I think it's essential in today's world because we've lost all of those spaces to do that. Um,
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. I mean, like if I felt I could actually go out and perform one of these rituals and not be somehow accosted or attacked, I think that's a big personal risk. It's a thing that can happen. People don't understand. It's a matter of understanding. It's a matter of this, that, or the other thing. But yeah, we don't have those spaces, and that's why I was interested when you said you're able to go out into nature, because that's like one of my, I don't have that ability right now to be able to do that, but to find those spaces, to find is would be really important, I think. And there's certain other rituals that I want to perform that I can't perform because I'm limited in my environment where it's at right now.
yeah.
I mean, how are we going to get those? That's the question. Just kind
Well,
of, just as a reminder to people, the current political environment is not believe it or not, it's not conducive to this. It's also getting worse.
mhm.
As a
Yeah,
warning.
depending on which state you live in, like there's certain states I just won't travel to right now, because I do kind of sense this witch hunt coming on. But
Yep. Well, I mean, Pam Bondi is talking about creating an anti-Christian list. And who
I'll be
under
the first on
who falls, but
it.
yeah, exactly. Who falls under that list, and what are so people need to remain aware of that and stay cognizant of
Yeah.
of these things.
And it's not that I'm anti-Christian. I think where my schism happens is this understanding of what Christ is.
Right. But that would be
And
considered
yeah.
anti. I mean, I've written there are several things online that I've written that are anti-Christian. I mean, I've got a whole thing about why I became
Mm,
a theurgist, which goes into seeing Christ more as a theurgist, as a necromancer, as a magician, which
I
is
agree with that.
anti-Christian. I think if it were really to get real, they put me in prison or whatever they would do. But that's fine. I can deal with this.
Well, and I think that's why it's important that we have this discourse and create community and a community of like-minded people. And there are power in numbers, and also in reconstructing these rituals. And that's what I'm really enjoying about this reading is, yes, it all comes through the self, but we're also learning about this practice that was reserved for royalty. And, they were, the pharaoh, the emperors were manifestations of God on the planet. They had to uphold that station. And well, my personal goal for ritual, and I don't know how long it's going to take to get there, but is to really, um, and I think this is what the ancient priests were doing, is like standing at that axis mundi, aligning themselves with the cosmic order, and in that ritual space, holding that energy. And I think there's a lot of power in that. And very excited to continue with this reading, and because I see a lot of wealth of information coming out and being able to reconstruct some of these more powerful rituals.
Well, maybe we can get to the point where we can have a space and get to a point where we can make this community work. Um, I kind of hear that we want to maybe continue this next time and
I'm ready to go. Yeah.
take up these. Yeah, you are. Me too. Let's take up some of these. Definitely take up these themes again. This has been a very exciting conversation. I really look forward to continuing this with you, Fig, and I really like this ability to speak with you about these things.
Yeah, same. Thanks, Chaz.